Before we get started here, it's important to know a little bit about New York City at the time the Fear City campaign started in 1975. I will quote directly from something I wrote for a previous upload of mine. It goes like this. Quote, New York City, 1970s. Population, 8 million. Reported violent crimes, 1,461,523. Reported murders, 19,048. Total reported cases of burglary, larceny, robbery, and vehicle theft, 9,153,690. By 1975, the unemployment rate was 12%. Thousands of city workers were laid off due to economic crisis. The filth, the violence, and the overall sense of lawlessness would create a shitstorm of epic proportions, even creating areas of the city where any outsider with a sense of survival wouldn't dare enter into. End quote. In the mid-1970s, the police and firemen's unions, as well as municipal worker unions, would go to war with the city. With massive layoffs on the rise and crime out of control, it would become some of the union's mission to alert residents and tourists that New York City was a mecca of danger, slowly sinking into the pits of hell. On January 1st, 1974, Abraham Beame became the 104th mayor of New York City. It was clear from the start that he was in for a wild ride. He was preceded by Mayor Lindsay, who in his 8 years dealt with the rise of violence, police corruption, labor strikes, including the 1966 transit strike, and growing racial tension. With the fiscal crisis of 1975 looming, Mayor Beame would get started on his layoff crusade by the end of his first year. In November of 1974, Mayor Beame would fire over 1,500 municipal workers, which accounted for jobs like teachers and sanitation workers. The following month, on Wednesday, December 11th, Mayor Beame would announce further layoffs. This time the number would be over 7,000. This daily news chart here will give you a picture of those affected. News outlets would interview various city workers at this time, many of them stating their willingness to take a pay cut in order to stay employed. But their cries to the city's top brass would fall on deaf ears. In 1975, with New York City in billions of dollars in debt and the fiscal year coming to an end in July, the layoffs would continue on. The city couldn't keep up with its operational expenses, and banks would start to refuse to loan any more capital. In April, over 13,000 more city workers would receive their pink slips. On Thursday, May 15th, 1975, the city would receive a massive blow to their bailout bid. New York Senator Warren Anderson would turn down Mayor Beame's tax and aid package, which asked for a total of $641.5 million. Furthermore, President Ford would turn down the city's request for $1 billion in federal credit. That same day, even more layoffs would be announced, which included over 1,000 police officers. But as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't only police and firemen unions who were affected. Municipal workers represented by DC37, the largest municipal union in the United States, had spent the past year protesting the layoffs as well. Educators and hospital workers, amongst other city employees, would take to the streets en masse. This article here, which I'll link to this video, was put out by DC37 and speaks about the history at that time. It states that an estimated 20% of the city's workforce was cut due to the municipal layoffs. In June of 1975, the police and firemen's unions finally had enough. They needed to concoct a plan that would not only get the people of New York City to notice, but the entire world. They would soon become a sharp thorn in the side of Mayor Abe Beame, and their upcoming campaign would divide the city even further. Game on. Daily News, June 10th, 1975. The notice goes out. PBA President Ken McFeely stood on the steps of City Hall a day prior, stating that a Council for Public Safety had been formed. The council would consist of 25 union leaders who represented police, firemen, and court officers. They would form teams who would assemble at JFK Airport, LaGuardia Airport, Grand Central Station, and Port Authority. They would be there to greet tourists and New York City residents in order to remind them that they were entering Fear City. PBA President McFeely would state, "We're going to tell them how to conduct themselves while they're here, like not going down certain streets after dark. And we're going to tell them what the crime statistics are." The campaign would start. Pictured here is PBA President Ken McFeely and Uniformed Firefighters Association President Richard Fazzini handing out pamphlets at JFK Airport. Mayor Abe Beame became enraged. Pounding his desk, he would state, "Their outlandish Fear City campaign, dreamed up to instill fear and panic amongst the visitors to the city, as well as its residents, is a gross outrage." He threatened to take legal and disciplinary action against anyone partaking in the scare tactics. On the night of June 12, 1975, the Transit Authority obtained a temporary restraining order preventing the assembly of union representatives in the city's transportation hubs. The order would be signed by Supreme Court Justice Lewis Heller. The unions would have no choice but to suspend the campaign. And with that, the Fear City drive was halted. The campaign would divide the city. More than half of the people polled by Daily News at that time said that the campaign was a big waste of time and that they themselves felt safe. A number of tourists were also interviewed on the streets. Many of them claimed to be unaffected by the pamphlets and that they also felt safe during their trip. On Monday, June 16th, the unions would go to court in an effort to protect their campaign, saying that it was a matter of free speech. By the end of the day, their wish would be granted. The Brooklyn Supreme Court Appellate Division would rule that the police and firemen's unions had a right to distribute the pamphlets because it was protected by their free speech. However, that doesn't mean the court was happy about the decision. For example, Associate Justice J. Erwin Shapiro would state, "The Fear City campaign can't be justified by any stretch of the imagination. The unions may have realized they have engaged in a self-defeating act, though they have the right to do so." The campaign would soon fade, although the words Fear City would remain in the headlines for some time. Throughout the remainder of Abe Beame's tenure, which would end in 1978, layoffs would continue, and the heat between him and the unions would not get any better. In 1978, Ed Koch would take over as the 105th mayor of New York City. Once again, a mayor would take over a city in a tumultuous era of crime and uncertainty. By the time Koch stepped into office, over 7,000 law enforcement officers had been laid off, and thousands more municipal workers throughout the 70s fiscal crisis. He would have his work cut out for him. Now let's dig into the pamphlet. The Fear City pamphlet launched in June of 1975 by the police and firemen's union officials. Picture this. It's 1975, and you've been saving up for that dream vacation in New York City. A cultural mecca filled with beautiful architecture, art, music, and some of the greatest food on earth. You finally made it. You step off the plane, retrieve your bags, and prepare to enter the concrete jungle. Before you can make an exit, you're approached by a group of men, and they give you a pamphlet. You look down, and you see these words, "Welcome to Fear City," accompanied by the image of death itself, the Grim Reaper. As if the idea of the Reaper wasn't scary enough, they managed to find just the right, menacing, creepy version of Dr. Death. Welcome to Fear City, a survival guide for visitors to the city of New York. The incidence of crime and violence in New York City is shockingly high, and is getting worse every day. During the 4-month period ended April 30th, 1975, robberies were up 21%, aggravated assault was up 15%, larceny was up 22%, and burglary was up 19%. Now, to solve his budget problems, Mayor Beame is going to discharge substantial numbers of firefighters, and law enforcement officers of all kinds. By the time you read this, the number of public safety personnel available to protect residents and visitors may have already been still further reduced. Under those circumstances, the best advice we can give you is this: until things change, stay away from New York City if you possibly can. Nevertheless, some New Yorkers do manage to survive and even keep their property intact. The following guidelines have been prepared by the Council of Firefighters and Law Officers to help you enjoy your visit to the city of New York in comfort and safety. Good luck. Number 1. Stay off the streets after 6 p.m. Even in Midtown Manhattan, muggings and occasional murders are on the increase during the early evening hours. Do not be misled by the late sunsets during the summer season. If you walk in Midtown at about 7:30 p.m., you will observe that the streets are nearly deserted. Number 2. Do not walk. If you must leave your hotel after 6 p.m., try not to go out alone. Summon a radio taxi by telephone, or ask the hotel doorman to call a taxi while you remain in the hotel lobby. Follow the same procedure when leaving the restaurant, theater, or other location of your evening activity. Number 3. Avoid public transportation. Subway crime is so high that the city recently had to close off the rear half of each train in the evening so that the passengers could huddle together and be better protected. It has been proved that increasing the number of transit police officers will cause a reduction in subway crime, but the announced decreases in transit patrol will have the opposite effect. Accordingly, you should never ride the subway for any reason whatsoever. In Midtown Manhattan, you may at only slight risk ride the buses during daylight hours only. Number 4. Remain in Manhattan. Police and fire protection in other areas of the city is grossly inadequate and will become more inadequate. In the South Bronx, which is known to police officers Fort Apache, arson has become an uncontrollable problem. If you remain in Midtown areas and restrict your travel to daylight hours, emergency service personnel are best able to provide adequate supervision and protection. Number 5. Protect your property. Theft has become so great a problem that the city is urging everyone to engrave identifying numbers on all property, and the police department has purchased special engraving pens, which are made available to the public. If you walk on Madison Avenue, or in other major Midtown locations during business hours, you will observe that many merchants keep their doors locked and will admit customers only after careful inspection. After hours, they protect their premises with special heavy safety gates. Accordingly, you should observe the following precautions. Number 6. Safeguard your handbag. If you carry a handbag or similar personal luggage, try to hold it firmly with both hands whenever you are in public. Never let it out of your hands. Above all, never let it out of your sight. Places that seem the most secure, such as restaurants or cocktail lounges, are often the most dangerous. Even a moment's inattention can result in a serious loss. Number 7. Conceal property in automobiles. If a package is visible on the seat or floor of your automobile, even though the vehicle is locked, there is an excellent chance that your property will be gone when you return. Accordingly, all property should be locked in the trunk or the glove compartment. Do not park your car and then transfer property into the trunk. You will probably be observed. All property should be secured before you arrive at your parking place. Remember also to keep all doors locked and all windows closed when you are in the vehicle. Remember too that auto thefts have increased this year. Number 8. Do not leave valuables in your hotel room and do not deposit them in the hotel vault. Hotel robberies have become virtually uncontrollable, and there have been some spectacular recent cases in which thieves have broken into hotel vaults. At present, bank vaults appear to be the only depositories that offer an acceptable degree of security for personal property. And finally, number 9. Beware of fire hazards. The fire department is severely undermanned at present, and further reductions are in prospect. Accordingly, you may have to evacuate quarters without assistance if fire should occur from either natural or malicious causes. Try to avoid buildings that are not completely fireproof, and familiarize yourself with exits and escape routes wherever you are. In hotels, try to obtain a room that is close by the fire stairs. These guidelines have been prepared and distributed as a public service by the Council for Public Safety, Room 516, 299 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. Till this day, the name Fierce City remains in the lore of New York City, whether it be through news articles, books, documentaries, or those that even hold a sense of pride due to the label. After over 40 years, the campaign slogan started by the Police and Firemen's Union still lives on.